Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Welcome to the edition of the Pan-African Pyramid Show that happens here every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. Your speaker is Andrew Irumba Katusabe. We are proudly powered by Fairway Hotel, NBS Television, the Spy Uganda, and Detective UG. Ladies and gentlemen, on 31st of August is the 7th Pan-African Pyramid Global Awards that will happen here at Fairway Hotel. We are just counting a few weeks to the event.
Join us on the 7th Pan-African Pyramid Global Awards 2024 and 10th Anniversary Bonfire Dinner, recognizing and awarding Pan-Africanists who selflessly fought and defended the rights and freedoms of the black race globally. On 31st August 2024 at Fairway Hotel from 3 p.m. Dress code, strictly traditional or African wear. Theme, Pan-Africanism plus environmentalism equals to humanism. Book your dinner card now. Table for 6, 3 million. Platinum, 1 million. Gold, 500K. Silver, 400K. Bronze, 150K. Come, let's rekindle our roots. Call 0757-342-317 or 0782-342-317 to book your ticket now. Africa, don't agonize, organize. Powered by Fairway Hotel, NBS TV, Grow Foundation, the Spy Uganda, Detective UG.
Please endeavor to get yourself a dinner card. The African Union, AU, is a continental body consisting of the 55 member states that make up the countries of the African continent. It was officially launched in 2002 as a successor to the Organization of the African Unity, which started in 1963 and was taken over in 1999. In May 1963, the two heads of state, the two heads of independent African states met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to sign the charter creating Africa's first post-independence continental institution, the Organization of the African Unity, OAU. The OAU was the manifestation of the Pan-African vision for an Africa that was united, free, and in control of its own destiny, and this was solemnized in the OAU Charter, in which the founding fathers recognized that freedom, equality, justice, and dignity were essential objectives for the achievement of the legitimate aspirations of the African peoples, and that there was a need to promote understanding among Africa's peoples and foster cooperation among African states in response to the aspirations of Africans for brotherhood and solidarity in a larger unity concerning ethnic and national differences. The guiding philosophy was that of Pan-Africanism, which centered on African socialism and promoted African unity. The communal characteristics and practices of African communities and a drive to embrace Africa's culture and common heritage. The main objectives of the OAU were to rid the continent of the remaining vestiges of colonialization and apathy, to promote unity and solidarity among African states, to coordinate and intensify cooperation for development, to safeguard the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of member states, and to promote international cooperation. The OAU Charter spelled out the purpose of the organization, namely, number one, to promote the unity and solidarity of the African states, to coordinate and intensify their cooperation and efforts to achieve a better life for the peoples of Africa, to defend their sovereignty, their territorial integrity and independence, to eradicate all forms of colonialism from Africa, and to promote international cooperation having due regard to the Charter of United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. liberation of Africa, the continent worked and spoke as one with undivided determination in forging an international consensus in support of the liberation struggle and the fight against apartheid. The OAU had provided an effective forum that enabled all member states to adopt coordinated positions on matters of common concern to the continent in international fora and defend the interests of Africa effectively. On 9th September 1999, the heads of state and the government of the Organization of African Unity issued the SIAT declaration calling for establishment of the African Union with a view to accelerating the process of integration in the continent to enable Africa to play its rightful role in the global economy when addressing multifaceted social, economic, and political problems compounded as they were by certain negative aspects of globalization. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had the primary role of OAU and later on metamorphosed into AU was to unite Africa, to get rid of colonialism, all sorts of colonialism. The question is, has AU achieved its rightful goal?
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
In the discussion about the African Union, I think it's appropriate today. I'm going to put it in a context. Normally, we would talk a little bit about the history of the African Union and the successes or failures that it may or may not have had. I'm going to do it differently today. This is 2024. The objectives that you stated are right now, as we speak, being met in the Sahel. Baba Goita, Baba Chiani, Baba Traore, the Young Lion. We have three, we call them the three kings here. We have three African leaders who are not talking about what they're going to do over the next 20 years. It's been 2 years at most, some would say less than a year, that they've come together and bonded as brethren. That's why we say the three kings, and have demonstrated what African unity is. They have not only worked to secure the interests of overthrowing corrupt establishments that are part of the colonialist, neo-colonial infrastructure of the African continent. They've overthrown them, successfully physically fought in a military fashion to put them out, and managed to negotiate a partnership with the second strongest military power on the planet today, the Russian Federation. And in doing so, then collaborated three countries together. We call it One Africa. We're not going to wait until all of Africa wakes up and does the right thing. We have three gentlemen now who have demonstrated that it can be done. In some of the regions, they're beefing up the textile industries. They've taken control of their natural resources and are now selling them. They were selling them at 1/100th or 1/200th of their value before, as France was robbing them. Now they're selling them at market value. If you can imagine the difference in the economic capacity that they're operating with now, as they control their own economy, Africa being the wealthiest landmass in natural resources on the planet, arguably. And now these gentlemen are taking that and using it to develop their countries. Like we said, the textile industries, the education, and military. They're getting militarily trained and beefed up to be able to defend what they've already overthrown and created. So as far as I'm concerned, quite frankly, if the African Union was doing what it stated it was going to do, and its mission was to do, then we would hear the African Union right now stating that these three brothers in one Africa are demonstrating the future of Africa and doing everything that we said we stated out to do, expelling the colonialists, becoming self-sufficient and independent, and working with other African leaders. And when I say African, I mean Black mother, Black father, African people in leadership. Not people that's living in Africa, but Africans ruling over the welfare and the interests and the lives of other African people. African. These are African men who are doing what the African Union said they were going to do. As far as I'm concerned, this is the African Union. It is now called the AES. It is now called the Sahel. We call it One Africa with our three kings. What they are doing in Central Africa, West Central Africa, through Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, is an African liberator's dream. Every Black man on this planet should be desiring to be able to do what those men have already done and are continuing to do. And so in answer to your question about has the African Union done what it's supposed to do, I would say the African Union are the brothers in the Sahel. Because I don't want a title that doesn't demonstrate action. They are doing what the Charter of the African Union has said it was going to do. Why then would we not establish the fact that they are the African Union? Because if you're not unifying African people, how can you be the African Union? If
Well,
you're
that,
not,
was the primary objective, uniting the African people. I was just adding to what you said, that was their primary objective, uniting the African people. So if they are not uniting the African people, then what's their relevance? Go on, my brother.
yes, no, I agree with you. I think sometimes we complicate things. I like to simplify it. If we have three men that are demonstrating in three nations that are adjacent to one another, who are unifying and saying, if you attack one of us, I heard Baba Traore. I'm 50 years old. He's a younger man than myself. I still say Baba because of the greatness of his actions and the position he has taken. He deserves that type of respect. One of our three kings said when ECOWAS was talking about attacking Mali or Niger, I think it was Niger, he said clearly, we will fight to the last drop of our blood if anybody attacks our brother. These nations are our brother and sister nations. These are our brothers. If you attack them, you attack us. Is that not African Union? Is that not African unification? All three nations have told France where they can go back to France to stop stealing the resources of African people. And they've done it with guns in their hands saying, we're not asking you, you need to go home. And now they've put out the US in some of the regions, and they're expelling the companies that are trying to prevent them from getting trade. Then they say, well, if you won't allow us to get certain raw materials and resources that we need and equipment, then we're going to put your company out of our country. They're taking control of the resources and wealth. They are unifying African people. And I think more than waiting for the African Union to do something, if we are doing, you are African Union as far as I'm concerned. You are bringing an African here in America to Uganda through the internet to share my African perspective on the development of affairs among African people. That's unification. And what we're doing right now is we're redistributing the wealth of information and understanding into an understanding of the Africans who are doing what all of us want to do, which is what is happening in the Sahel. And we're relabeling what they're doing, not what they're talking about, not a label, not some money where they raise funds from colonialist countries and go around and have events and talks and speeches. These men are doing it and giving the wealth of their nations back to their people. That is the African Union. I don't even recognize what we classify as the African Union. And I'll say one more reason why I say it's a problem. If we look at it right now, what they're doing in that region is phenomenal. I will go further. If there is an African Union that is relevant, how is it that the Kenyan president, Ruto, can take the land of the people and take them from being landowners to being sharecroppers, and no word from the African Union saying that this man must be removed? How is it that Ruto can put in a bill that says that the farmers cannot take the seeds that were given to them by God through their ancestors and pass down one to the other and trade natural seeds? No, that would be illegal and you would be arrested. You have to use the GMO seeds that once they're put into your soil, you can no longer use natural seeds and they won't replenish themselves. You have to now buy them, which means you're now subjects of the owners of those seeds who made these genetically modified seeds. Where's the African Union on that? How did the African Union let the Kenyan military or army or police officers board a plane from the African continent to go act as mercenaries against African freedom fighters who defeated slavery in the West and are now trying to get themselves together in the West, in Haiti, constantly fighting the US, Canada, and France. And they're trying to get themselves together, and you would send mercenaries from the African continent, the home of the Kikuyu, the home of the Mau Mau, who was leading in the liberation of Africans on the African continent, and you would send those brothers over to Haiti to kill Haitians. Where is the African Union at when that happens? I want to hear the answer. Where are they? Has anybody heard them coming out? These things are relevant to us. There is a youth igniting across the African continent saying we no longer want corruption. We want you to stop stealing the money and the resources and invest back into us because we are the future. That is a beautiful thing. Where is the African Union saying, now that we have this, and we have 3 countries who are partnered with a military might so they can defend their leaders, why don't we take this youthful energy and bridge it across every country and begin to get transformation and improvement in our quality of life and in our military life and in our economic life and in our social order? Why aren't we hearing that from the African Union? Where is the African Union saying no to homophilia? We absolutely reject universally homosexuality, pedophilia on the African continent. It will not be normalized. We don't care what you say and who you are. It's non-negotiable. I haven't heard them. But I have heard the leaders in the Sahel, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. I've heard them say we will not tolerate homosexuality, homophilia, or any branch thereof. So they're saying we don't even have names for all of this stuff. We're not going to tolerate it and accept it. It will not be allowed in our countries and in our region. That's a regional decision by real African men who know that a man's supposed to be with a woman. They didn't say that through their words, but I'm making that assumption based on their walk. They know that a black man's supposed to be with a black woman, produce black children and black nations, like what they're doing. And they're taking an open position. Where's the African Union?
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Let me be honest with you. If you look the pack of the continuation of colonization, which I think a lot of you guys knows, African Union haven't done any single thing about that. Other things is that the promotion of non-African languages inside African Union. It's even like, it's getting very worse actually. Me as a Swahili advocate globally, it's getting very worse. How do you see an institution that, what will you think if European Union in order to apply for a job inside the European Union, you were asked to have to speak Luganda or Runyankole or something. How will you think about that? Do you think European will accept that? So why are we required to speak English or French or Portuguese or some other crazy colonial languages inside the African Union as a requirement? Because the institution is not there for African people. It has done nothing for Africa, and will do nothing for Africa. Even the discussion they are having today is about what the medical things, the pharmacy, and the climate change, and all of that things. Our people are worried about next meal. We now worry about the climate change. Those are the idea of Europeans who are taking our natural resources and then they come back and they tell us about climate change and so on. So it's my opinion, though. I'm not saying you guys have to believe me, but I believe that if we ever want to do something, African Union have to be closed. Absolutely. I don't see any reason why president of poor country like Malawi will come to African Union summit and spend at least 20,000 US dollar while his people are suffering hungry, and come to African Union summit and do nothing, and nothing happen 1 year, 2 years, and so on. So I think it's even ridiculous to have African Union like operating all these years.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Abene, thank you, and revolutionary Pan-African greetings to everyone. My name is Sipiwe Baleka. I am attending in the capacity as the head of research and strategy for the Pan-African Federalist Movement West Africa region. I send greetings to my good friend and comrade, Brother Imani, who we have started working together this year. And he knows my position on these things already. Let me just briefly say, I don't disagree at all with the criticisms about the African Union. In fact, first of all, I am calling from my home in the capital city of Bissau in Guinea-Bissau. Okay. But I was born and raised in Chicago. I am one of the first, I'm a Balanta descendant, and I am the first to repatriate to my ancestral homeland. I got involved. I happened to have been at the African Union in February of 2003, right when the African Union was launched. And I was the only member of the African diaspora, the historical diaspora, present when the African Union adopted its Article 3Q amendment, inviting and encouraging the full participation of the diaspora in the building of the continent. At that time, at the very beginning of the African Union, of course, we didn't know what it would be and what it would become, but there was a spirit of optimism. And it happens to be, I was the first person from the diaspora to sign a memorandum of understanding with the African Union to establish its AU 6th Region education campaign. At that time, they did not have a well thought out framework on how they were going to include the diaspora. But they had one instruction, which was that the diaspora should organize itself and put forward 20 representatives to sit on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union. I was in charge of that process, going back, beginning in 2003. And so to the question, today's question, has the African Union fulfilled its mission? I can give you a specific answer to that in at least one particular area, which is no. Even to this day, those 20 seats on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union have not been occupied by our representatives. And in fact, the African Union, and I have direct knowledge and experience of this, the African Union has gone to great lengths to sabotage the effort of the diaspora to independently select its representatives from civil society to be a part of what is actually a toothless and powerless organ within the African Union, because it's only an advisory organ of the African Union. And if they were serious about including the diaspora as the sixth region on equal footing with the other 5 regions, then they would allow for 10 to 15 representatives on the Permanent Representatives Committee within the African Union, because that is the base of where all decisions ultimately begin and end. Now, having said that, I will wrap up with this. The very conversation, I think, is unfortunately not very helpful. The African Union is not going to close its doors. And my good comrade Imani offers no solution or no pathway for how we can utilize what power we have to shut the doors of the African Union. I happen to agree with what Comrade Ayo just said, which is we should simply ignore the African Union and build the alternatives that put people at the center. If we're going to talk about unity, if we're going to talk about a united African states, the question has to be asked, what kind of unity? Is it going to be unity of the political elites at the top, or is it going to be a unity of the African people at home and abroad? I believe all of us here would like to see the unity of all African people at home and abroad. And so our conversation is best directed at the logistics of how to harness the sovereignty that exists within African people to bring about that kind of united African states. And this is the agenda of the Pan-African Federalist Movement, again, which I am here representing. And I'll give you one example. In the Alliance for Sahel States, if you look at the constitution of Burkina Faso, Articles 146 and Articles 147 state that any proposal for a confederation, a federation, or a complete unity, continental unity, right, must be submitted as a referendum to the Burkinabe people. And so I am suggesting that now is the time is ripe for all Pan-Africanists to unite behind that. Go in and say, we support what is happening. And in order to demonstrate to the world that we support the alliance, we support President Ibrahim Traoré, and to give democratic legitimacy to what's happening, we organized the first referendum because it's already part of the Constitution. Having had that successful referendum, we use that as an example, a template. We go to Niger, we go to Mali, and then we start going out to all the other African nations and have these referendums. Now, any nation that would refuse would eventually become a pariah, because it could be said, well, why are democratic principles and freedoms respected in the Sahel Alliance and they're allowed to have a referendum on this issue so that the people can exercise self-determination, and these other nations are preventing it? We would then be able to, what, shame, isolate these pariah nations who refuse to accept the sovereignty of the people. This is where our conversation should be at, because one, the African Union is not going to close its doors, and we don't have the power to shut them. The best we can do is, like Brother Comrade Ayo said, build the alternative. And I'll land there. Thank you.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I do love Brother Sifiwe. He's my good friend. And also he's, of course, Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Republic of New Africa. So he's my friend, I know that. And I agree with him absolutely that the matter of fact is that we do surely, we all agree that African Union should be closed, because the idea of reshaping it or trying to edit it, it has failed. Now, what he says that we should just focus on what we can accomplish because it's too powerful, which I agree that I also he mentioned that as well, that we should just ignore that and leave that alone and then do what we can do, which is true, by the way. But one thing you guys need to understand is that it does not even take that much effort to close that institution. Just trust me on this. It's not something very difficult. Why? Because everyone knows that this institution is not working. Can you recall what His Excellency, the President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni Kaguta, said last time? I think he mentioned this. He's been mentioning this, that you come to African Union Summit and then you sit there and then you go, there is nothing happening. So if the leaders already discovered that this thing is not working, I think that we should just get up and say this is not working, just to let people know. Because if your president, for instance, the president of Gambia, if he comes to African Union Summit and then he does nothing, or African Union, he send whoever it is delegation, then nothing happened. And when he come back to Gambia, people welcome him at airport and say, hey, why did you spend our money to go to African Union Summit while nothing is happening from there? Once the people get up and hear that this institution needs to be closed, that can be very easy to get rid of it. But the other way to ignore it, I think that's very simple, and I think we all should do that anyways. We should just ignore it and do what we need to do. As Sifiwe also suggested, that we should join the Sahel movement. That also is another thing good. But to close it by fighting maybe, or by doing another thing, it's not gonna be easy, because there is so many people are making check of this institution. But I don't think we just need to keep hoping that there will be some fruits come from inside African Union.
Thank you, Comrade Iman. Let me hear from my senior brother, Ayuk Iman. What do you think?
Unmute yourself, Mr. Ayo.
You need to switch on yourself, Comrade Ayuk.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I think essentially we're all saying the same thing. I think it bottoms out at what we call the African Union is not working in the interest of African people. We need to turn our attention other places, and whether it dies a natural death by us working and doing things that are effective, or somehow us, dismantling it, either way, it works in our interest. I think what we really need to be considering is, one thing, if they're not doing things to help Africa. The question would be, and I think these gentlemen would be better to answer this, the real issue if we're talking African Union, because quite frankly, they're not doing anything African unification wise. The question would be, are they actively doing things that are damaging to the continent? And are they a major problem, or are they just something that's just a lot of air that's a waste of our time to talk about? That would be a question I would ask them.
I hear you.
Maybe our last question, I will begin with Mr. Sifiwe. A few weeks ago, 3 countries officially left the ECOWAS, and they're saying ECOWAS has not been doing things that actually empower the Africans or even protect their interests. They have created their own. This is exactly similar to AU, African Union, because African Union was created to protect the interests of Africa, the entire continent. We are here saying we don't feel that we are being represented properly. This is similar to what ECOWAS is in that part of the African region. And 3 countries have already left it and created their own. What does that mean to the future of these regional blocks? I'll begin with Mr. Sifiwe.
Okay, I think that was directed at me. I think I heard most of the question. So let me answer it 2 parts. It's a 2-part answer. The first question that I understood was, is the African Union actively doing things to harm us, African people. So I can only speak about those things that I know and that I have direct firsthand knowledge of. And so in that respect, I can say that in terms of the African Union's AU Sixth Region or Diaspora Initiative, the answer is yes. It is actively doing things that harm us. For example, I have been a part of a network of committed activists who for 20 years have been organizing the Sixth Region. And that organization is primarily amongst what the AU refers to as the historic diaspora. Those of us whose ancestors were captured as prisoners of war, trafficked across the Atlantic, and enslaved in the Americas. That segment of the diaspora is the diaspora that was originally left out of the African Union. Okay? Point of history, we should remember that in 1964, at the Organization of African Unity, Malcolm X, who represented the Afro-American people as the leader of a government in exile, a national liberation movement, like any other liberation movement that was going on in the continent, reminded the OAU not to forget us. That this Pan-Africanism required what? The unity, as Garvey said, of Africans at home and abroad. So when I say that the African Union is currently doing things to harm us, 20 years ago, when we started organizing the historic diaspora in a good faith, legitimate effort to take advantage of the Article 3Q amendment to include us, when the African Union realized that the representatives that were being elected were the representatives coming out of the historic diaspora and were not the representatives or the people that they had intended when they used the word African diaspora. They had intended it to refer to the contemporary diaspora. Those Africans that left the continent of their own free will, or, I'll grant maybe economic coercion. And so when they realized, oh no, wait, this historic diaspora is going to come in to take these seats in ECOSOC, that is when the African Union began to actively sabotage our efforts. And I know this because I was the one that drafted the first memorandum of understanding with the AU that created the AU Sixth Region Education Campaign. I have documented this in some of my writings, and it continues to this day. I recently attended the Accra Reparations Conference that was held in Accra, Ghana, in November of 2023. Some of the same people that were involved 20 years ago are still there, still involved now, actively creating a division between the historic diaspora and Africans on the continent. So this is my example where I say I can attest to as a witness that yes, the AU is actively sabotaging, right, the spirit of Ubuntu and Pan-Africanism, which we all subscribe to. Now, to the other question, I live here in Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau was recently held the position of chairmanship of ECOWAS last year, okay? I have, in the last 3 years, witnessed how the president of Guinea-Bissau has installed himself in 2020 in an unconstitutional fashion. We had a free and fair election, so we thought, but the process wasn't finished. The president got frustrated with the process and decided to take matters into his own hands and installed himself without completing the constitutional process, creating a constitutional crisis in Guinea-Bissau. that has resulted in the progressive forces, right, now represented by the Frente Popular in Guinea-Bissau, to become increasingly critical of the president and his misuse of authority. Twice he has shut down the National Popular Assembly. There have been 2 attempted coups, which many of us have good reason to believe were intentionally orchestrated by the president himself in order to get support from ECOWAS, which has been sending troops and occupying and militarizing Guinea-Bissau in the past 2 years. We have witnessed these foreign troops from ECOWAS occupying our streets. We have witnessed the increase in military equipment. You have the trucks with the mounted guns. You have soldiers with brand new uniforms wearing face masks so they can't be identified. I myself have been detained twice just this year. And so I would say that by proxy, the African Union, which is doing nothing to prevent this and allowing ECOSOC to violate the sovereignty of the people of Guinea-Bissau that never asked for these troops and that are there supporting a president which originally only got 24% of the first round of voting in 2020, that I would say that this is harming, actively sabotaging and harming, right, progressive forces in Guinea-Bissau on the African continent. So that's my answer.
Can I add something on it? Can I add something on it, please?
By all means.
Yes. So in 2019, I believe, I was still in Washington, D.C. Dr. Arikanachi Omboliko, which some of you may know, she was sent to U.S. to be ambassador of African Union. That time, I actually attended some of her conferences. And after that, once she started to speak or to talk about path of continuation of colonization, which is still apply around 16 countries in West Africa, the France wrote a letter sent to African Union, and that was the end of her position. So when you talk about is African Union actually still sabotaging and destroying and not protecting us, yes, it is doing that. That's why she was kicked out from African Union ambassador. I think that's as a fact. That's number one. Even if you talk on low level, if a leader of a country spend money, you know, our African countries are very poor, as you know. They don't have enough money. If one president spend 20,000 US dollar to go to the meetings, that is useless. That is sabotaging our people's life. So I think that there is so many things we can come up with, but obviously, if you're not active protecting Africa, let's give you an example. Congo DRC. You see how is in mess. All natural resources being rooted, and African Union is doing nothing. So that means it's giving them green lights to do so. It's so many examples we can talk about, but even let's talk about like democracy. So many countries we have ancient, maybe I can say ancient leaders who are in Africa sitting as the president. And the Constitution of African Union said that they need to promote democracy. How can we promote democracy? And you say nothing to these people who have been on power forever, and they change the Constitution anytime, and then this which leads to the coups. So it's pretty much African Union is sabotaging and stopping anything you're trying to do. Actually, is already there, trying to stop anyone who trying to do that.
Thank you so much, Comrade Iman. Can I come now to senior brother Ayoki Matthew? You have anything to say about that? Especially the question about the creation of the new organization by those 3 countries.
Yeah. When I was listening, what actually came to my mind was something that the gentleman said about some of the failures of the African Union. And I know this may sound, well, actually, it's very relevant. We look at the fact that the single independent nation in the Western Hemisphere that's Black ruled is Haiti. Haiti asked to be part of the African Union and was denied.
Yeah.
So for us to imagine, and I mean, as an African in the diaspora, I got to say, we were kidnapped and enslaved, sold into this. We have a group of Africans in the West who defeated all of the military enslavers and really led to the end of slavery around the world. Not entirely. We know we still have it in the Sudan and other places, but predominantly the ending of slavery was done because of an African nation of Africans in the West, Haiti, defeating the English, Spanish, and the French, to then ask and request to be part of the African Union, which they are African country that happens to be a satellite country that defeated slavery, and to be denied is something I think that we need to pursue further, whether it maybe not the African Union, but maybe, look, I'm thinking in the Sahel, they're fighting the French. The Haitians have already defeated the French. Should not, and I'm not trying to put this on them, but as African people, I would like to see the African continent through those brothers and through decent leadership, where they're in the leadership of it now, One Africa, say, hey, Haiti is an African nation and is part of the African continent. So that then we could really begin talking about, now that's true African union and African unity.
Okay.
If I may add one further quick point to what Brother Ayo just mentioned, and Comrade Imani can attest to this because he's been a part of this process. The Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, which was established in 1968, just 4 years after Malcolm X was given observer status to the OAU. The OAU had established an African Liberation Committee and established their headquarters in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And after Malcolm gave his, disseminated his address to the heads of state at the OAU, a few months later, he went to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and received the instructions that all the other liberation movements at the time were receiving. At that time, the Organization of African Unity, and especially the heads of state, Jomo Kenyatta, Nyerere of Tanzania, and Milton Obote of Uganda, as well as Algeria and Ben Bella, had recognized the New African Liberation Movement in the United States on equal footing with the other liberation movements. Throughout that period, African American people supported the liberation movements in Africa. We did demonstrations at the United Nations in New York. We raised monies, right? We did a lot to support the liberation and independence movements in Africa. And we were recognized by the OAU. When I was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa this past January, one of the first things that we did was go to the African Union to renew our observer status, reminding them that not only had it been granted to Malcolm X in 1964, but in 1975, Queen Mother Audley Moore, the first signer of the Declaration of Independence of the Republic of New Africa, was also recognized by the Organization of African Unity, and she had put forward our self-determination claims. So I say all of this to say that we have hand-delivered, right? Comrade Imani can attest to this. We have physically gone to the African Union, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, to renew in the same spirit that Brother Ayo just mentioned about, here we are, a liberation movement, an independence movement of African people abroad. We were not successful like Haiti, but we're still here. requesting that the African Union recognize us to help us go forward in our independence movement. Not only have they not recognized us, they haven't even bothered to respond. So this is another example of the African Union failing us and sabotaging the independence and liberation efforts of African people.
Thank you. Thank you, comrade. Let me bring in now a question which I will ask both of you or three of you to answer as our final interaction. This comes from Abdulaziz Yusufu, a political activist and social researcher from Sudan. He has a question. I will begin with the comrade Ayokimath. Listen to this one. I have a question about the violence and war crimes committed in Sudan by warriors. Where is the African Union? Where is the African Security Council with what is happening now in Darfur in particular? I think this will be our last interaction and as we close down the debate. Let me begin with Comrade Ayo.
I think that the African Union, as far as I'm aware, is the same place it has been on, as far as I know, on homosexuality. They have not been out there fighting it. That is something near and dear to the hearts of African people. The corruption of leaders like Ruto, I have not heard from the African Union taking a definitive stance against the behavior there. The murder and slaughter of our brothers and sisters in the Sudan, been 1,300 years fighting, man. I mean, they've been in a long, protracted struggle against invasion. And as far as I know, we don't see the African Union on the forefront in bringing any security to that region. I would go back to where I started in the beginning. I would not be looking at the African Union as that organization that we hear that gives that name. If I was to say African Union, I'm looking for people who are doing it. I would look more to the young brothers, well, the new nation states of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and to see not what these ones that have done nothing have done, but how can we duplicate what they're doing and spread that like butter throughout the African continent in a very tangible and realistic fashion, thus providing the same security for our African brothers and sisters in the Sudan as they are providing for themselves in one Africa, or what they call the Sahel. So that's where I think that the direction is, because we cannot expect people who have not shown any interest in our survival or progress to do anything differently. Let's go forward and take what we have that works and do something for ourselves.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ayo Kimath, my senior brother. Comrade Iman, take it over from there. What do you think?
I want to make sure that you guys understand the fact that African Union, if you want to ask what African Union have done for Sudan, maybe you ask what African Union have done in general, not only Sudan, but also in general. What has African Union done? Because, you know, the Sudan, you know, it's ought to be union. And Sudan and South Sudan, they were separated under the watch of African Union. It's out to unite people, but it's dividing them. Somalia is in mess since 1990 today. African Union didn't do anything. Libya was destroyed completely, which I hope you guys, you know this. I don't want to preach this to you. And African Union didn't do anything about it. Rwanda genocide. African Union didn't do anything about it. The Congo is under. There is more than 120 labor groups in the Congo. And African Union can't do anything about it. The chairman of African Union, Moussa Faki, is from Chad. And the president of Chad was assassinated or killed in war. I think it was 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And African Union, where the chairman is come from, they couldn't do anything about it. So we should not expect any good things, as I said in Swahili. You cannot harvest cassava from the thorns, the garden of thorns. You cannot. So what I can say, those who are worried about Sudan, maybe you should worry about other countries as well, because the peace, like Sahel countries, they don't even know peace. Even Nigeria itself, the giant of Africa, they don't know peace. So why do you think it's only the case of Sudan more than the case of Somalia, the case of Mozambique, the case of Central African Republic, the case of South Sudan, the case of, you can't even mention. That's why I said in the beginning that the Agenda 2063 supposed that by 2020, we're supposed to silence all the guns in Africa. But not only we did not silence them, but we increased them in the president. We never have them. So my point is that African Union is not going to do something for Africans. And you cannot even change it. You cannot make it work. It's impossible to do that. The only thing is to close it. And how we're going to close it? We just have to voice our voice.
Thank you, Comrade Iman. Let me finally hear from Mr. Sifiwe Bareke.
I can't add anything to what Comrade Ayo and Comrade Imani have said. I'm not sufficiently informed on the AU and what it has or has not done in the Sudan, but I'm in agreement with the perspectives of Brother Ayo and Brother Imani.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Thank you so much, comrades. I don't know that you can hear me, all of you, online. My senior brother, Ayo Kimasi from Washington, D.C. My comrade, Sifiwe Bareke from Guinea-Bissau. And my comrade, Iman from United States. You had here a very great audience. Some of them are from Sudan and South Sudan and Uganda, here physically in Kampala. You had an audience here physically in Kampala here, and I'd like to thank you for accepting my invitation virtually, and you have spared some time for the sake of Africa. Comrade Ayo Kimasi, I'm looking forward to seeing you in August. Comrade Sifiwe, I'm looking forward to seeing you here in August 31st. And Comrade Iman, I'm looking forward to seeing you, all of you here in Kampala on 31st, as we continue to build blocks, build bridges, so that Africa can finally become one country, United States of Africa. My name is Andrew Irumba Katusabe, your speaker. I say now.
Join us on the 7th Pan-African Pyramid Global Awards 2024 and 10th Anniversary Bonfire Dinner, recognizing and awarding Pan-Africanists who selflessly fought and defended the rights and freedoms of the black race globally. On 31st August 2024 at Fairway Hotel from 3 p.m. Dress code, strictly traditional or African wear. Theme, Pan-Africanism plus environmentalism equals to humanism. Book your dinner card now. Table for 6, 3 million. Platinum, 1 million. Gold, 500K. Silver, 400K. Bronze, 150K. Come, let's rekindle our roots. Call 0757 342 317 or 0782 342 317 to book your ticket now. Africa, don't agonize, organize. Powered by Fairway Hotel, NBS TV, Grow Foundation, The Spy Uganda, Detective UG.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.